Nevertheless, the Lord raised up judges, which delivered them out of the hand of those that spoiled them. And yet they would not hearken unto their judges.
Have you guys ever heard of
Yes.
Samson?
Yes. Oh, don't spoil the story.
Yes, Samson's the guy with long hair. Have you ever heard of Gideon?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. A lot of you guys have heard of Gideon. Have any of you guys heard of Othniel?
Absolutely not. Amen.
Nope, no Othniel?
That's my dad's name.
So,
Sure.
I'm excited. That means you guys are going to learn something today.
Yeah.
Othniel is a very short judge in the book of Judges. Not as short in stature, just in length of description. He's very shortly described in the book of Judges, and but what we take from Othniel is the fact that he is kind of the perfect judge. From beginning to end, he kind of relates the story perfectly. What a judge was supposed to do, what happened, is all perfectly laid out. There's about 6 verses, and literally in those 6 verses, if you remember last week, the book of Cycle does what? It's a big what?
Cycle.
Cycle. Did I say cycle?
Yeah, that's the book of Cycle.
The book of Cycle is a big cycle. That should make it easier. The book of Judges is a big cycle. And the story of Othniel is a really perfect representation of that because it's very short. It says they did it, he saved them, and then they went back to it. Like I said, Othniel is regarded as the perfect judge. We see no failings, no shortcomings in Othniel. And he does a good job with what he's supposed to do. So let's go to Judges 3, 7 through 11.
116.
116. 116 in the Blue Ribbon.
Thank you.
Okay. So the story of Othniel, starting in verse 7. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and the Ashtaroth. Therefore the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And he sold them into the hand of Cushan-Rishmathaim, king of Mesopotamia. And the people of Israel served Cushan-Rishmathaim for 8 years. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for the people of Israel, who saved them, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and he judged Israel. He went out to war, and the Lord gave Cushan-Rishmathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hand, and his hand prevailed over Cushan-Rishmathaim, so that the land had rest for 40 years, and then Othniel, the son of Kenaz, died. Othniel, the son of Kenaz, died. So if we look right back to the beginning, chapter 3, verse 7, this same verse is used over and over again through the book of Judges to indicate a new kind of time period. A new time in which a judge has to take over. So it says, and the people of Israel did... No, that was actually verse 12. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. You go down to verse 12, you see it again. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So every time, 6 times in the book of Judges, the same verse is mentioned, telling you of a new time. Easy enough? Easy enough. Othniel, like I said, is a very short account. It's a very short account, not a lot's listed. We don't have a lot here. One thing that's interesting about Othniel's account is who does he save? What country? Israel. Most of the time it's not listed that way. Remember, what did we say Israel is made up of? Many tribes. Nice. Many tribes. It's made up of tribes. And usually it's a tribe that falls to another country. This time it was Israel as a whole. The entire thing fell in this account. Othniel saved the entire country, which is a cool thing. Cushan-Rishmathaim, his nickname he was given literally means doubly wicked. He's a pretty bad dude. You like that name? Rishmathaim? Rishmathaim? Doubly wicked. Truly evil. What is the most amazing thing about this is they had a guy who they called doubly evil that it took them 8 years to figure out they wanted to be saved from. So they have Cushan Rishmatham, who's doubly evil. And they finally cry out after 8 years, they've had enough. They've had enough. And what does God do? He sends Othniel. He sends Othniel to save them. And so, Othniel wins and overthrows Cushan Rishmatham. Yeah. One of the first applications from this thing and through the entire book of Judges is sin leads to slavery. Sin leads to slavery. They fell into sin. They did what was right in their own eyes, and they were eventually sold into slavery. You see that over and over and over again in this book. Sin leads to bad things for you. Does slavery sound like a good time? No, slavery is not a good time. Sin leads to bad things for you. Sin leads to bad things for you. Another thing that's interesting about Othniel is we have actually already met Othniel in this book. Huh? We've actually met Othniel back in chapter 1 of this book. Othniel's name has already been mentioned, but to kind of get the full picture, we're going to go to Joshua. That's probably only a couple of pages back.
What, 15, 109.
109 in the Blue Bibli. So we meet Othniel here. And the same thing is worded in the beginning of Judges, but we're going to take it down the book of Joshua kind of more accurately to the time at which it was happening. Verse 16. And Caleb said, whoever strikes down Kereth Sepher and captures it, to him will I give Akash, my daughter, as wife. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, captured it and gave him Akash, his daughter, as his wife. So already we learned something about Othniel. He is one, a really good warrior, a man of valor. Two, he's related to Caleb in a couple different ways. He's related to Caleb. Now, we got to be careful here. And the way it's worded now, what is Othniel's relation to Caleb? His what?
His knee. What?
Knees.
Oh.
Okay.
How is Othniel related to Caleb?
His knee.
Brother.
Brother and father-in-law.
Oh,
Now,
not a girl.
that's what it says.
Wait, he married his
At first I
brother?
thought you said knee.
I am
Like,
confused.
I thought we were talking
Right.
about
Here's what we got to understand to kind of grasp this. In the Hebrew, the word brother is used very much in the same way today we use the word cousin. How many of you guys have cousins who aren't really related to you?
me.
Yeah. How many of you guys have cousins who might be related to you way down the line?
Oh yeah.
What is cousin? How is cousin?
Baby.
How is cousin kind of used in our vernacular?
You're related, you think.
Maybe related, close enough to where they're kind of a brother, right? That's kind of the word here. So it could literally mean it's his brother, but that's probably not true considering Caleb has a different father. That would seem to indicate that's not the case. That is probably more our idea of cousin. He's kind of related, maybe. Well, now for sure he's his son-in-law. And he's a valiant warrior. So the first thing we find out about Othniel is he's already a valiant warrior, right? The first time we meet Othniel, he goes and captures a place. Caleb, who's no slouch himself, do you guys know who Caleb is? It's his father-in-law.
Yeah.
Nice. Who's Caleb? Who was Joshua? Remember Joshua from last week?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Who was Joshua?
He led the Israelites to the promised land.
Right, he helped the conquer the promised land. Who was Joshua's second right-hand man?
Caleb.
Caleb.
Oh.
When they went to scout out the promised land, Joshua came back and said that we can take this, we can do this. Somebody else also said they can do it. Who was that? Caleb.
Yeah.
10 other people who went with them said what?
No, we can't.
We can't do this. So 12 people go spy on the promised land. Joshua comes back and says, man, we can conquer this. Caleb comes back. It's like, let's go right now. And 10 other people are like, no, we shouldn't do this. That's who Caleb was. Caleb didn't want to slouch for his son-in-law, right? He wanted a valiant warrior. And that's Othniel. So Othniel, being the perfect judge, has already proven himself to be a valiant warrior. He's already powerful. He's already a good guy. And he's married to the daughter of Caleb, who was not a slouch either. Another thing we're going to learn this evening, kind of quickly, I don't expect you guys to remember this so much. But I hope, yeah, it may come back as a Sunday school question later. I hope that this will kind of help add some perspective and understanding to what you read. Does that make sense? Okay. So the Nelson Study Bible summarizes the 5 major Canaanite deities. We're tracking so far. The Canaanite gods. The Nelson Study Bible, which is a really good study Bible, summarizes the Canaanite gods this way. Number 1, El was the chief god who was supposed to father of all the other gods and mortals, though he was not the most powerful god. So El was the father of all their other gods. Right? You guys know Greek mythology? Who was the father of all their other gods? Zeus. El's kind of like Zeus. Easy enough? So El is the father of the other gods. Asherah was El's wife, mother of the other gods and the goddess of the sea. Easy enough? Alright, so I don't know if Yes. Yes. Now you're starting to see the connection. Asherah poles was kind of a thing built for her. Baal was the Canaanite storm god who was supposedly responsible for the rain, fertility, as well as the cycle of the seasons. If you read the Old Testament, you see Baal a lot. You see Baal a lot. Is that tracking so far? Ashtoreth was the female fertility goddess, the goddess of love and war, closely associated with Baal. She also had some associations with the stars. Who did the Israelites start worshiping here before Othniel showed up? Abraham. Here in chapter 3. Baal and who? The Asherah. They started worshiping the Baals and the Asherah. So who are they worshiping? There you go. And then they have another one. Anath was Baal's sister and wife, who also was the goddess of love and war, and who often depicted with wings. All right. So like I said, I don't necessarily remember what you don't necessarily remember. You won't necessarily remember that, and you don't really have to. But having a concept of what they're talking about and understand that these are different gods they mentioned who do different things will make life a little easier for you as you read, especially as you read this book. Because guess what? They show up a lot. They're not really supposed to. So after Othniel conquers the land, how long did they have peace?
40 years.
40 years. They had peace for 40 years until who died? Othniel died. Can you guess what happens next?
They did what was evil in the sight.
They did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And so on. Right. So what can we learn from Othniel? It's a short passage. It's only about 6 verses and then it's over. So what can we learn from it? The first thing is this. Othniel's faithfulness started long before this. Othniel's faithfulness and valor and being a good guy and being the guy he was supposed to be, did that start when God called him to free Israel? No. We see that started many years beforehand. Othniel was already a good guy. He was already a man of valor. He was already a guy who God could use. So I have a whiteboard. In case you didn't know what that was. Yes. Yes. Have you guys ever heard the phrase, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called? Okay, if you haven't heard that phrase, that's a really popular Christian phrase we like to say a lot of times. Is that always true?
No.
No, that's not always true. Who is somebody that was qualified? Othniel. Othniel. When was Othniel, if this was the conquering of Israel, when was Othniel faithful? Before that. So Othniel was faithful here. And then he conquered Israel. And then how long was Othniel faithful after this? Till the end. Alright? You starting to see this track? Othniel's faithful here. He's faithful from here all the way to here. And then God calls him to free Israel. The entirety of Israel, like I said, which is kind of neat, because for the most part, they only conquered various tribes. So this idea that God only calls God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the call, is not true. And I want to be careful here, because sometimes that phrase can breed laziness. That phrase can breed laziness. Because what are you waiting for if you believe God doesn't call the qualified? What are you waiting for? Him to call you, so you become what? Qualified. Now, I say not always true, because there are instances, even in this book, and we'll get to those, where God calls people who are absolutely not qualified. And what does God do for them? He helps get them qualified. In your life, though, so what we're saying is, what that phrase is kind of saying is, when do we start getting qualified? When it's supposed to happen. When are you supposed to be working? When are you supposed to be getting qualified? When are you supposed to be working for Christ? Before that, now. So you can put whatever it is right here, whatever you would like, whatever that thing is that you want to do, whatever that big thing is you're working towards, whatever that thing is that you see is important, whatever that is to you, you can put this here. For Othniel, it was conquering Israel and saving Israel from oppression. For you, it's probably not that. Maybe. For you, it's probably not that. But if you're working towards this, when are you supposed to start working? Now. You guys know what the average is? You know, you ever heard the overnight success? Heard that term? Overnight success. It's really popular, especially in like music. When somebody pops on the scene, all of a sudden they call them an overnight success, this artist and whatnot. You know how many years precede that?
A lot.
You know what the average is? It's about 13 years. So for somebody to become an overnight success, they have been working for how long? 13 years to get there. If you are not working now, you will most likely never get here. That goes for everything. We can talk about spiritual things. We can talk about the spiritual things. You guys are trying maybe one day to get married and raise awesome kids, godly kids. If you're not working now, you're going to struggle to get this. Doesn't mean you can't. It doesn't mean God's not going to just all of a sudden bless you right here. But if you're not working now, you're not going to get that. We can even take that practical. I know it's scary to start talking about practical things. If your goal is to achieve a certain thing by the time you're 20 or 30 or go a certain place, if you're not working now, what are the chances of you doing that?
Slim.
Very, very slim. Very slim. God often calls the qualified. Often. And when they start being qualified, it isn't 5 years from now. They start being qualified now. And that starts with reading your Bible. That starts with praying. It starts with being faithful today. Because what have we said before? If you're not faithful in the small things, what are you not going to be? You're not going to be faithful in the big things. It starts now. It starts today. Does that make sense?
Right.
It's one of the things we learned from Othniel. And what's interesting, Othniel, who was faithful from the beginning of his life to the end of his life, when you read his section, what do we describe this section as? It's very what? Very short. That's a really good thing in the book of Judges, because the people who have really long sections, you think it was because they were too awesome that they had to keep writing about them? No, it's because they were really terrible, and Samuel was like, you guys should learn something from this. In the book of Judges, if you have a very short account, that means because you're pretty great. And you just did what you were supposed to and went home. Because he was faithful here. And when we find out, we look at the opposite end of the spectrum at the very end of the book, Samson. Where was Samson faithful? Nowhere. Samson's life was a train wreck. And he was miserable the entire time. So where do we need to start being faithful? Now. I won't keep harping on that. But that's one of the things we learn from the life of Othniel. God called him because he was qualified to do it. And then because he was qualified to do it, God gave him even more. What does it say? Verse 10, the Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and he judged Israel. Othniel was already qualified before he got there. And God gave him even more to do the task. We need to be faithful before the fight. We need to be faithful before the fight. And then lastly, like I've mentioned before, when we do things the right way, they are much simpler. Please understand that. When you do things the way they're supposed to be done, and you do things the way the adults are telling you to do them, when you do things the way the Bible tells you to do them, it's a lot easier for you. I want you to remember Othniel. I want you to have this picture in your mind of who this is, what he did, how he did it, especially when we get to chapter 16 of this book and we start talking about Samson. Samson's life was anything but simple. It was a pain. It was a train wreck. And often in our lives, if we don't do things the right way, we cause ourselves a lot of hardship, and a lot of hurt, and a lot of pain, a lot of unneeded hardship and hurt and pain. We've chosen not to do things the way they're supposed to be done. Othniel did it right. And he has a really short account, and he does really awesome, and then he goes home. That's what I want for you guys. I want you guys to have an awesome life where you do things awesome and then you get to go home and sit on the couch and watch TV for a little bit. That's what I want for you guys. If you do things the wrong way, you don't usually get that. All right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pray and then we're going to send somebody over to start hiding. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening. I pray that you'll be with us. I pray that you will help us, Father, as we learn and study your word and understand who Othniel was, the perfect judge. And Father, that we can do that. We can become that. We can be part of that. And all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.